Welcome back to The Explainer. So today we are diving into a really fascinating, honestly almost paradoxical shift in human consciousness. We usually just take it completely for granted that there's a you inside your head, right? Like a little person sitting in there, looking out through your eyes, listening through your ears. But what if that entire familiar structure just completely changed? I mean, seriously, imagine seeing, hearing, and tasting without an actual person inside coordinating all of those experiences. Imagine having absolutely no central eye to look at a tree and think, I am looking at a tree. Imagine a reality where that central coordinator just vanishes. Now, I know it sounds exactly like a concept from a sci-fi movie, but this is a fully documented state of human functioning found in our source material, and it fundamentally challenges pretty much everything we think we know about how we perceive reality. Okay, let's dive right into this. Section 1. The decluttered state explained. Let's start by defining what the disappearance of this internal coordinator actually looks like. So our source material focuses heavily on an individual known as UG, following a profound physical transformation that he literally referred to as a calamity. He entered what is termed the declutched state. And what this means is a state where the senses operate with complete, total independence and at absolute peak sensitivity. But, and this is the crucial part, entirely devoid of a central coordinator. No I. There's absolutely no unifying entity bridging the gap between any of his sensations. To put that into perspective, think about a totally normal, everyday phrase like, I am looking at a flower. In our normal state of being, an I effortlessly and instantly claims that mundane action. You don't even think about it, right? You just naturally are the person looking at the flower. But today, we're exploring a phenomenon where that I vanishes completely. The act of looking is still happening, and obviously there's still a flower there, but the actual owner of the action is just gone. So normally, our everyday perception is highly coordinated. It's heavily I-centered. Everything feels tied together into one really neat continuous package of you. But in this declutched state, reality is entirely fragmented. Without a central I to tie it all together, the sources describe each sense as essentially embarking on its own independent career. It's like each sense is operating totally on its own, completely disjointed, just doing its own thing unless a specific response is actually required by the environment. Let's move to section 2 and see how this builds. Sight and sound untethered. Okay, so when this center completely falls away, the actual mechanics of perception change drastically. Take his vision, for example. Yuji's vision functioned literally like a gigantic camera. It was this unfiltered vista vision, just operating at absolute peak sensitivity all the time. And here is perhaps the most jarring mechanical detail. There was absolutely no blinking reflex. I mean, you definitely wouldn't want to challenge him to a staring contest. His eyes just operated purely as a mechanical lens, taking in the world in this almost terrifyingly vivid, constant stream of visual data that was completely unedited and unmanaged by any sort of personal observer inside. And wow, it wasn't just sight that transformed. The source material outlines a really fascinating shift in his hearing, creating what they termed an echo chamber. Think about it. Normally, you hear a dog bark and you immediately perceive that sound as coming from an external source, somewhere out there in the world. But for UG, sounds just didn't feel external anymore. Instead, they originated inside him. Because there was this absolute lack of a boundary between self and other, his auditory experience turned into a literal internal echo chamber. The perception was quite simply that everything was happening within. Moving right along to section 3, isolated points of touch. Actually, do me a favor really quick. Just clasp your hands together right now. You can feel your solid hands, right? The continuous form of your fingers, your palms. You fundamentally feel like a solid physical object. Well, hold on to that, because this concept is profoundly counterintuitive. In the declutched state, without that central bridging entity in the brain to stitch all that sensory data together, the body is no longer felt as a solid, continuous form. When Yuji touched something, or if something touched him, he didn't feel a unified body interacting with the world. He only felt completely disconnected physical sensations, literally just isolated points of contact, kind of floating, without any solid bodily form to anchor them together. Which brings us to section 4, the state of not knowing. So you might be wondering, what actually happens to cognition and memory when all of your senses are entirely disjointed and just running completely independently? It is absolutely fascinating to see how a mind operates entirely without a center. The sources outline what they call the state of not knowing, and this brilliantly illustrates a highly procedural, honestly almost robotic recall mechanism. Step 1. UG could look at a common object, let's say a cow or a clock, and there would be absolutely zero recognition. He's just taking in the raw visual data. Step 2. He encounters an external demand for information. So for example, someone comes up and asks, "Hey, what time is it?" Then, and only then, step 3 happens. His memory activates, strictly on demand, to provide the answer. Unless a response was actively required by the outside world, he just remained in this continuous, quiet state of not knowing. So, what does this all mean? When the central coordinator vanishes, what actually remains of the human experience? Today, we've impartially unpacked an existence made of unfiltered VistaVision, internal echo chambers, isolated points of touch, and this strictly on-demand memory. And honestly, it really forces us to step back and examine the incredibly fragile mechanics of our own everyday reality. That cohesive, solid world you're experiencing right now, the very feeling of being a unified you, is a highly complex biological construction. What happens when that construction simply falls away? It's a profound, lingering question to carry with you. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the reality you see. Catch you next time.